Welcome back, Virgo. There's something very emotional coming through in this reading today. It feels like someone has been carrying thoughts of you much longer than they ever intended to. Maybe they've tried to stay busy. Maybe they've tried to convince themselves they were fine. But the energy coming through feels different now. Because some truths can only be avoided for so long before the heart starts speaking louder than the mind. And what I'm seeing here is someone beginning to realize just how much your presence truly meant to them. If you're a Virgo, or if you're dealing with a Virgo energy, stay with me until the end. Because the story unfolding here feels less like a coincidence, and more like someone finally seeing what they've been missing all along. Before we begin, I'd love to ask you something. What is one thing your heart has been quietly hoping for lately? If you'd like, leave it in the comments along with the number 6. Not because the number itself is magic, but because Virgo energy often teaches us that healing begins the moment we become honest about what we truly want. All right, let's take a look at what the cards want to reveal. There's something very emotional coming through in this reading today. It feels like someone has been carrying thoughts of you much longer than they ever intended to. Maybe they've tried to stay busy. Maybe they've tried to distract themselves with work, responsibilities, or the noise of everyday life. But the energy feels different now. Because some feelings don't disappear simply because we stop talking about them. They wait, they linger, and eventually they ask to be felt. What I'm sensing here is a person who is beginning to realize that your absence has created a space in their life that nothing else seems able to fill. And honestly, I don't think they expected this. I don't think they expected to miss you the way they do now. The Four of Cups keeps pulling my attention because there is something about this person's emotional state that feels disconnected from everything around them. Life continues. The days continue. People come and go. Conversations happen. Yet there is this strange feeling that something important is missing. Almost like they're moving through their routine while secretly searching for something they can't quite name. And the more I sit with this energy, the more it feels like what they're searching for is actually you. Not necessarily a dramatic memory. Not necessarily some huge moment between the two of you. It's the small things. The way you listened. The way you understood things without needing long explanations. The calmness you brought into situations that felt complicated. The sense of peace they experienced around you that they didn't fully appreciate at the time. You know, sometimes people don't recognize comfort until it's gone. And honestly, that's exactly what this feels like. The energy shows someone looking around their life and realizing that things don't feel the same anymore. The Five of Cups comes in with a very different feeling. This card doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet. It feels like somebody sitting alone with their thoughts. Somebody replaying old conversations. Somebody remembering moments they once brushed aside because they assumed there would always be more time. I keep hearing this thought in my mind. I miss them more than I thought I would. Not because they're lonely. Not because they're desperate, but because they're beginning to understand your value in a way they never fully did before. For some of you, this person may have believed they had everything under control. They thought they understood their emotions. They thought they knew what mattered most. Yet something has shifted recently, and now they're looking back with different eyes. What's interesting is that the regret doesn't seem to come from one specific event. It feels cumulative, like dozens of small moments finally catching up with them. The times they didn't respond, the times they pulled away, the times they assumed you would always be there, the times they prioritized other things instead of acknowledging what was growing between the two of you. And now those memories feel heavier, not because they're trying to punish themselves, but because they're finally seeing them clearly. Then we have the moon. And oh my God, this energy feels incredibly deep, because beneath everything else, I sense confusion giving way to truth. This person may not have fully understood their feelings when you were close to them. In fact, I think there were moments when they actively tried not to look at those feelings. It felt easier to stay distracted, easier to stay busy, easier to convince themselves that what they felt wasn't important. But emotions have a way of finding their way back to the surface, especially the real ones, especially the ones connected to someone who genuinely touched your heart. The moon feels like those late moments when the world becomes quiet and there's nowhere left to run from your own thoughts. The moments when memories suddenly appear for no reason. The moments when a familiar voice, a familiar smile, or a familiar energy drifts back into your mind. And when that happens, it feels like this person's heart softens. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just little by little. The energy feels like a slow awakening. A realization that what they shared with you mattered. A realization that your presence brought something meaningful into their life. A realization that they may have taken certain things for granted. And perhaps the hardest realization of all, that missing you has become impossible to ignore. Because the further away they get from the connection, the more they seem to understand what it truly meant to them. Something about their perspective is changing in a way they never expected. It's almost like pieces of a puzzle that never seemed important before are suddenly falling into place. And honestly, the energy feels a little overwhelming for them, because they're starting to connect dots that they spent a very long time ignoring. The Judgment card keeps drawing my attention because this doesn't feel like a small realization. This feels bigger than that. It feels like someone looking back over an entire chapter of their life and seeing it through completely different eyes. You know how sometimes we meet people who enter our lives quietly? They don't arrive with fireworks. They don't demand attention. They simply show up, stay consistent, and become part of our world little by little. That's exactly what I'm picking up here. This person is beginning to understand that your presence was never loud. It was steady. And somehow, that steadiness became one of the most valuable things they've ever experienced. What's fascinating is that they seem to be revisiting moments they once overlooked. Conversations, messages, small gestures, things that didn't seem significant at the time. Now those memories carry a completely different weight, because they're seeing the intention behind them. They're seeing how genuine you were. They're seeing how often you showed up with an open heart. And for some reason, that realization keeps hitting them harder every day. The Hermit appears here, and the energy immediately becomes quieter. This feels like somebody spending more time alone than usual, not because they want to isolate themselves from the world, but because their thoughts keep leading them back toward the same place, back toward the same person, back toward the same questions, back toward you. I keep feeling this energy of reflection, not obsession, not fantasy, reflection, the kind that happens when life slows down enough for honesty to finally enter the room. And what honesty is showing them right now isn't always comfortable, because they're beginning to recognize that there were moments when they misunderstood you, moments when they questioned your intentions, moments when they assumed things that were never actually true. Oh my God, this feels incredibly human, because we've all done that at some point. We've all looked at someone through the lens of our fears instead of through the reality of who they truly are. And that's exactly what seems to be surfacing here. This person is realizing that some of the things they believed about you were shaped more by their own worries than by anything you actually did. The more they sit with that truth, the harder it becomes to ignore. The Six of Cups brings in a completely different emotional texture. I keep seeing memories arriving unexpectedly. A familiar laugh. A familiar expression. A moment that seemed ordinary at the time. The way you reacted to something. The way you cared. The way you made people feel comfortable around you. Little details. Tiny details. The kind of details people usually forget. Yet somehow they aren't forgetting them. In fact, they seem to remember more and more as time passes. And that's what makes this energy so powerful. Because the memories aren't forcing themselves into this person's mind. They're simply showing up naturally. Almost like their heart wants to remind them of something important. I also sense this growing awareness that what they admired about you wasn't something temporary. It wasn't tied to circumstances. It wasn't tied to appearances. It wasn't tied to convenience. It was who you were, your consistency, your kindness, your ability to remain authentic even when situations became difficult, your willingness to care without needing attention for it. And honestly, I think this person underestimated how rare that really is. The energy shows someone quietly acknowledging that they may have judged certain situations too quickly, that they may have misread your actions, that they may have failed to recognize your value while they were busy focusing on things that didn't truly matter. There's a deep humility coming through here, a softness, a willingness to admit that they didn't have all the answers. And for someone who once seemed very certain about their perspective, that's a significant shift. What keeps coming through over and over is a single thought, not spoken out loud, not confessed to anyone, just felt. I didn't see them clearly. And once that realization begins, it becomes difficult to return to the old version of the story. Because now they're seeing the connection through a lens of truth instead of assumption. They're seeing your consistency instead of your silence, your sincerity instead of their doubts, your value instead of everything that distracted them from it. And the more clearly they see it, the more they seem to understand that what they shared with you was far more meaningful than they allowed themselves to believe at the time. A strange sense of admiration is beginning to replace the confusion that used to live inside this connection. The energy feels different here. It feels like somebody who thought they understood exactly what they wanted suddenly realizing that very few people have ever affected them the way you have. The magician is standing out immediately, and honestly, I can't ignore the way this person seems to be looking at you right now. For some of you, this may not even be direct communication. It feels more like observation. Quiet observation. They're paying attention. Maybe through social media. Maybe through mutual connections. Maybe through memories that keep resurfacing when they least expect them. Whatever the situation is, they're noticing things they didn't fully appreciate before. What I'm picking up on is a deep respect for the way you move through life. There is something about your energy that feels incredibly capable to them. Not loud, not performative, not attention-seeking, just capable. Some people walk into a room and demand attention. Others naturally earn it without trying. This feels like the second type. The more they watch you, the more they seem fascinated by how you handle challenges, how you carry yourself, how you remain composed when life becomes complicated. Honestly, I keep hearing this thought from them. How do they do that? Because from their perspective, you have a way of navigating situations that would overwhelm other people. The magician energy here feels like someone recognizing talents, strengths, and qualities that they may have overlooked before. And what surprises them most is that none of those qualities feel forced. They feel natural, effortless, authentic. For some of you, this person is realizing that your intelligence was one of the things that attracted them from the beginning. Not just intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, the way you read people, the way you understand situations, the way you seem to know when to speak and when to remain silent. That kind of wisdom stays with people, even long after conversations end. And the more they think about it, the more difficult it becomes to compare anyone else to you. Because I do sense that comparisons are happening. Not intentionally, not in a cruel way, but naturally. People enter their life. Conversations happen. Connections form. And yet something feels missing. Something feels incomplete. It's almost as though every new interaction quietly reminds them of what made you different. The Page of Cups arrives with such a tender energy. This card feels like words that haven't been spoken, messages that haven't been sent, thoughts that remain trapped inside someone's heart. And honestly, there is a vulnerability here that surprises me, because this person may not be comfortable with vulnerability at all. They may be the type who prefers certainty, control, distance, yet something about you softens those defenses. I keep sensing moments where they almost reach out, moments where they start typing something, moments where they imagine what a conversation with you would feel like, and yet hesitation keeps appearing. Not because they don't care. Actually, the opposite. The energy feels hesitant because they care more than they expected to. Sometimes emotions become heavier when they matter. Sometimes silence becomes harder to break when the heart has something genuine to say. The Eight of Swords feels connected to that struggle. There is so much happening inside this person's mind. Questions, doubts, what-ifs, concerns. The energy shows someone replaying possibilities over and over again, wondering whether enough time has passed, wondering how you would respond, wondering if they truly understand their own feelings. And while all of this is happening, they can't seem to stop thinking about you. That's the part that keeps standing out. The harder they try to redirect their attention elsewhere, the more your energy seems to find its way back into their awareness. A song, a place, a memory, a conversation. Something always circles back around. Oh my God, it almost feels frustrating for them at times. Because they thought distance would create clarity. Instead, Distance seems to be creating recognition. Recognition of what they felt. Recognition of what they lost sight of. Recognition of how unique this connection actually was. I keep feeling this growing realization that nobody else creates the same emotional response inside them. Not because you're perfect. Not because they believe you're flawless. But because the connection itself feels irreplaceable. There is a difference. And they're beginning to understand that difference more clearly than ever before. Deep down, beneath all the questions and hesitation, there is a simple truth trying to emerge. No matter how many directions their attention travels, it always seems to find its way back to the same person. And that person is you. A feeling of certainty is beginning to emerge where confusion once seemed to live. Not loud certainty. Not impulsive certainty. This feels much slower than that. Much deeper. Almost like somebody standing at a crossroads for a very long time and finally realizing they already know which direction their heart wants to go. The Two of Pentacles immediately gives me the sense that this person has been trying to balance multiple realities at once. Responsibilities, expectations, practical concerns, emotional concerns. And honestly, it feels exhausting. I keep seeing someone trying to keep everything under control, trying to make every decision make sense, trying to calculate every possible outcome before taking a single step forward. But life doesn't always work that way. Especially when emotions become involved. Especially when feelings continue to grow no matter how hard someone tries to organize them into neat little boxes. For a long time, it seems like this person believed they could keep everything separate. Their heart over here. Their responsibilities over there. Their fears somewhere else. Yet the energy feels like all of those compartments are beginning to collapse into one another. And the more they try to avoid that reality, the more obvious it becomes. Because some choices aren't really choices at all. Some truths simply wait until we're ready to acknowledge them. What stands out to me is that this person is becoming increasingly aware of what truly matters to them. Not what looks good on paper. Not what other people approve of. Not what seems convenient. What actually matters. And that realization is changing everything. The Two of Swords reversed feels incredibly significant here. Because I don't sense avoidance anymore. I don't sense somebody running in circles trying to escape their feelings. I sense somebody getting tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of overthinking. Tired of creating distance between themselves and what they genuinely feel. You know, there comes a point where the mind simply cannot keep arguing with the heart forever. And honestly, that's what this energy reminds me of. A surrender. Not to another person. Not to a relationship. But to the truth. The truth of what they feel. The truth of what they want. The truth of what they've been trying not to admit. And what keeps surfacing is the realization that you are never just a temporary chapter. For some of you, this person tried very hard to convince themselves that time would change things. That eventually the connection would fade. That eventually their emotions would settle. That eventually they would move on without looking back. But something interesting happened instead. The longer they sat with their feelings, the clearer those feelings became. Not weaker. Clearer. Oh my God, that distinction feels important. Because clarity is very different from impulse. Impulse comes and goes. Clarity stays. And this person seems to be reaching a place where they can no longer dismiss what their heart keeps showing them. The Hanged Man brings in such a profound shift in perspective. I don't feel action yet. What I feel is understanding. Deep understanding. The kind that changes the way somebody sees an entire situation. It's almost as if they're looking back at the connection from a completely different angle now. Things that once confused them make sense. Things that once seemed complicated appear much simpler. Things they once resisted no longer feel threatening. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is that your role in their life was never as small as they tried to make it. I keep sensing someone reflecting on the future in a way they never allowed themselves to before. Not fantasy. Not wishful thinking. Reflection. They're beginning to ask different questions. Not how do I avoid this? Not how do I distract myself? But what am I actually trying to build? And every time that question appears, your energy seems to appear alongside it. Because this connection no longer feels like something temporary to them. It no longer feels like a possibility they can casually set aside. There is substance here, meaning here, potential here. The energy shows somebody slowly accepting that. Not perfectly, not overnight, but honestly. And with that honesty comes a growing sense of peace. Because indecision creates noise. Clarity creates quiet. And for the first time in a very long time, it feels like the noise inside them is beginning to settle. The constant back and forth, the endless questioning, the internal struggle, none of it seems as powerful as it once was. What remains is something much simpler. A recognition that certain people enter our lives for reasons we don't immediately understand. A recognition that some connections continue to matter regardless of how much time passes. And perhaps most importantly, a recognition that walking away from what truly matters can become far more painful than facing the emotions they were once afraid to feel. A quiet determination is taking shape around this connection, and honestly, it feels very different from everything that came before. The energy no longer feels stuck inside someone's thoughts. It no longer feels trapped in endless reflection. What I'm sensing now is somebody beginning to ask themselves a much more important question. What am I going to do about this? Because there comes a moment when understanding your feelings is no longer enough. There comes a moment when awareness asks for action. The Ace of Swords feels incredibly powerful here because I keep seeing somebody wanting to clear the air, wanting to remove confusion, wanting to say things they should have said a long time ago. Not because they're trying to create drama, not because they're trying to force an outcome, but because carrying unspoken feelings has become heavier than telling the truth. And honestly, that truth feels surprisingly simple. They care. They never stopped caring. The difference is that now they're no longer trying to argue with that reality. I keep getting the image of someone rehearsing conversations in their mind, going over different scenarios, thinking about what they would say if they had the chance, thinking about how they could explain everything that has happened inside them. And what stands out is that this doesn't feel like somebody searching for perfect words. It feels like somebody searching for honest words. There is a difference. Perfect words impress people. Honest words connect people. And this person seems far more interested in connection than appearance now. The Eight of Wands brings a noticeable shift in momentum. The energy feels restless, not anxious, restless, like somebody who has spent so much time thinking that sitting still no longer feels comfortable. I keep sensing movement, plans, ideas, decisions forming behind the scenes. For some of you, this could involve communication. For others, it may simply involve preparing themselves emotionally for a conversation they never thought they would have. Either way, the energy feels like somebody becoming increasingly aware that opportunities don't remain open forever. And that realization is motivating them. Oh my God, there is something surprisingly vulnerable here. Because underneath all of this movement, I still sense fear. Not fear of rejection exactly. More like fear of being truly seen. Fear of exposing emotions that have been hidden for a very long time. Fear of admitting how much this connection actually means. The Page of Cups arrives right in the middle of that vulnerability, and the energy becomes softer immediately. This feels like a heart that wants to speak, a heart that is tired of hiding behind logic, tired of hiding behind distance, tired of pretending that certain feelings aren't there. I keep hearing someone imagine what it would feel like to finally be honest. Not strategic, not guarded, just honest. And what's beautiful is that their focus doesn't seem centered around convincing you of anything. Instead, it feels centered around expressing something genuine. There is a sincerity here that wasn't fully present before. A willingness to be emotionally open. A willingness to risk discomfort in exchange for authenticity. And honestly, that feels like tremendous growth. The Emperor enters this reading with an energy that surprises me. Because this isn't the version of the Emperor that feels rigid or controlling. This feels like someone stepping into responsibility. Someone deciding that if something matters, they should treat it seriously. The energy shows a person who is no longer interested in half measures. No longer interested in uncertainty. No longer interested in keeping one foot in and one foot out. What they seem to want now is stability, consistency, something real, something that has the potential to last. And that's where the emotional tone of this reading changes again. Because what began as longing has slowly transformed into intention. The connection no longer feels like a memory they're carrying around. It feels like a possibility they're starting to take seriously. I keep sensing someone looking at the future differently than they once did. Not through fantasy, not through fear, through maturity, through accountability, through a genuine desire to build rather than simply feel. And perhaps that's the biggest shift of all. Because feelings can be powerful, but action requires courage. The energy shows somebody gradually understanding that. Understanding that meaningful connections deserve honesty. That important people deserve effort. That real love asks for presence, not just emotion. And deep within all of this, there is one message that keeps surfacing over and over again. Not spoken loudly. Not announced dramatically. Simply felt. If I get the opportunity, I want to do this the right way. Because for the first time in a very long time, their heart and their intentions appear to be moving in the same direction. And that's all I have for you today. There's a quiet message lingering in this reading, and it's simply this. Some connections continue to matter, even after long periods of silence, distance, or uncertainty. Whatever chapter you're currently living through, I hope this reading offered a little clarity, a little comfort, and perhaps a reminder that your feelings deserve to be honored too. Thank you for being here and sharing this space with me. Your time, your energy, and your presence truly mean more than you know. Virgo, never underestimate the impact your heart has had on the people you've touched along the way. Take care of yourself, be gentle with yourself, and trust your own inner wisdom above all else. I'll see you in the next reading. Sending you love. Okay, bye-bye.